MCC 11 is the Halloween MCC, which means everything got spookified from the team names to the power level of the teams. Oh my god. Anyway, this is a complete analysis of the MCC 11 teams with new segments, improved editing, and more. Let's get started. Before we get into the analysis though, please check that you're subscribed. I do these for nearly every MCC, and you subscribing could really help me hit my goal of 30k before the end of October. So let me outline how exactly I'm gonna go about this analysis. Skip to this timestamp if you just want stats, you just want numbers, you want that raw data. Skip to that timestamp. Alright, for the rest of you nerds, here's how I'm going to go about this analysis. First, an objective analysis of every team based on purely statistics and previous scores. Then we'll talk about teams in a more specific way with more detailed and targeted stats to be more accurate. After that comes the subjective analysis of every single team in the tournament and talk about stuff like chemistry and leadership. Then individual scores with the best player in every game to the best player in specific types of games, and even to the best player overall in the entire tournament. They won't necessarily be in order because I'm disorganized, but yeah, there you go. Quickly though, before we move on with the video, here's a little disclaimer. More and more of these segments are getting subjective, so when this is on screen, it means that what I'm saying is, in essence, my opinion. When it isn't on screen, however, the things I say are based off statistics and data alone, and I don't mean to disrespect any of the players with this video. I'm sure they're all much better at both content creation and Minecraft than me, and I'm only ranking them based on Minecraft skill in this one tournament. Okay, let's get into the objective analysis then. In statistical last place, we have the Aqua Abominations. This team comes in last because Martin, or in the Littlewood, and Catherine Elizabeth are both below average players. In every game, Catherine has a score below the average event score, and Martin only beats out that score in a few games. Either way, even though both Solidarity Gaming and Krinios are fairly good players, they're both highly erratic in their performance, which means that they average to being, well, just that, average players, even though they might do very well from game to game. The next team is the Red Rabbits. I know, I can't believe it either. With Sparkles and Phil both being consistent top 15 players, and Tubbo also being a very good player, I struggle to explain why this team came this low. And then it hit me. Every team above the Rabbits is either consistently good or has at least one God player if they aren't consistent, with the only exception to this rule being the Orange Ocelots, but we'll get to them in a second. The fact that in just a few games Tubbo and Nikki heavily underperformed, maybe because they was first MCC, maybe because they threw for content, or maybe because the team they're on MCC 10 Aqua threw for content in point split games, that led to the Rabbits losing out on the literal 3 to 4 points in the end, which separated 9th, 8th and 7th. Similar reasons persist for the Orange Ocelots, who beat out the Rabbits by just 1 point in the end, because even though CPK and Kratzy are consistently good players, Finster and Mini Muka both are consistently below average players, and even though Mini beats out the average in some games, this is more than compensated for by his average Sands of Time score, which is 0, since he's only played the game once back when coins were not split among teams, and was unable to lead the dungeon. In addition to this, none of these players played in MCC 10, and given that there are so many new people and the viewer teams in MCC 10, they missed out on an opportunity that so many others had to get quite a large boost to their averages. With just 3 extra total points than the Ocelots, in 7th place, we have the Green Guardians. This team is fairly cut and dry. Connor Eats Pants is considered as an average player, whereas he may have actually dragged down the team with his normal scores, and Pete manages to carry James Charles all the way over the edge of them both being equivalent to 2 fairly good players. Byrne also carries his own weight fairly well despite some low scores, but the kicker here is that since James played in MCC 4, he hasn't played a few games like Ace Race, meaning that he doesn't drag down Pete in these games, which allows Pete to really shine and propel the team up to 7th. Then, zooming ahead of that 7-8-9 cluster, we have the Violet Vampires. This team is, quite frankly, saved by the fact that Quackity is an average. Tommy and Fundy are both top 15 players, and Wilbur isn't too bad himself. Basically, this team is consistent thanks to Quackity being an average, and manages to beat out some other teams with really good players by being uniform and being fairly good at that. It's also interesting to note that Wilbur and Tommy have thrown multiple times in the past for content, and this definitely has affected their average. However, I'd be willing to bet that this doesn't matter, because as MCCs have progressed, they've gotten less and less sweaty about winning. Another thing that's quite interesting is that while Fundy hasn't thrown whole events like Tommy has in the past, he's definitely thrown games when he doesn't see the possibility of him getting a good placement, like for example Ace Race of MCC 8, for either content or to try and test out new theories or new strategies. After the Vampires, we have the Blue-Black Cats. Now this was the most surprising placement I have ever seen. I completely expected this team to come 3rd or 4th easily, and there's a reason they're not in that place though, and I'll explain that soon. Now however, this team, which is by the way insanely good. H-Bomb is considered an S tier player by most, and his scores definitely reflect that. Combine this with the fact that Scott is a top 15 player, and that both F-Whip and particularly Shovel have been really coming into their own lately, and we have a surefire recipe for a strong team. The Black Cats are beaten out, however, by a team that is completely unexpected and which single-handedly delayed this video by 1 day as I checked and rechecked the stats. The Mustard Mummies. That's right, the team of Dan TDM, Quig, Pearlescent Moon and Smallish Beans managed to beat out the Blue Black Cats by a solid 16 points, which is no small amount. So how did they do it? How did this team, which despite having an S tier player also has an average and a few below average scores, beat the team of regularly above average players and an S tier player? It just makes no sense, right? Wrong. The reason the Mustard Mummies won over the Cats, the reason they got those extra 16 points, was because of Ace Race. Ace Race is, in my opinion, one of the most broken games points-wise in MCC. Let me explain why I think this, and just for this bit, let's whack a subjective sign up there in the corner, because it's not based on pure facts, but a mix of collated facts and observations. So I think most players in the tournament view Sands of Time as a very high-risk, high-reward game. Right, because they all use it as a risky play when times are tough and when you really need a massive amount of coins to boost you up just that little extra amount. Now, let's compare the highest score in Sands of Time, one of the best games for coins, with the highest score for Ace Race. Look at that, there's literally no competition. Ace Race is the game in MCC with the highest potential for coins earned, without a doubt. Now, before I continue this, I want to say here that I'm not properly representing Ace Race here, because even though there are so many points up for grabs, it's A, extremely easy to mess up in Ace Race and get no coins, because B, the coins available in Ace Race are extremely unevenly distributed simply due to skill level. A player who is in the top 5 will not drop out of the top 10 for the entire race, simply because they were skilled enough to be in the top 5 in the first place. Again, this wouldn't be a problem for other games, but because Ace Race is so much more placement based than action based meaning it rewards you for something like kills, a player who gets top 5 will almost definitely rack up all of those juicy first few placement points. This also means that because of the point structure of Ace Race, it's extremely hard for a player who, for example, does bad in the first 2 laps and then becomes the literal Flash in the third, to even compare to a player who did average in all 3 laps. Phew, I think that made sense? Either way, Ace Race points are broken and the Mummies are all surprisingly good on average at it, and the Cats are not. And the massive point differences created not only accounted for every other game in which the Cats beat the Mummies, but also gave the Mummies that extra push which rocketed them up to 4th place. Okay, after that mammoth of a placement, let's move up to 3rd place, the Cyan Centipedes. This team is fairly cut and dry. Techno is a top 5 player, Tapple is a top 15 player, and both Kara and Puffy are top 20 players. Again, a surefire recipe for an amazing team, and it especially dominates in PvP games, in which Techno and Tapple really dominate. Techno also really helps this team, which without Techno would have come around 6th, and which was propelled by Techno to 3rd, simply because the rest of his team was good enough to let his scores really shine. Next up are the Lime Liches. Liches? I don't know, man. Or the Hermitcraft team. This team comes in at 2nd tier statistically because Fruit, as usual, is an S tier player, and on a good day will easily come in the top 5. Combining this with the fact that False and Ren in MCC9 had one of the best tournaments for points of all time, this saved them from being the dead weight on teams' averages that they have been in the past, and because of that really good tournament, their skill is now accurately reflected by their averages. This, plus Grian becoming more and more of an above average player with each tournament, has led to the consistency and skill required to push the Liches up to the top 5, and Fruit's excellence in games like Battlebox, To Get to the Other Side and Parkour Warrior finishes this team off with a chef's kiss of a nice 2nd place. Finally, in 1st place, we have the Fuchsia? Am I pronouncing that right? I don't know. The Fuchsia Frankensteins. Either way, this team is so unbelievably overpowered that I thought it was a joke at first, but no. The Dream Team have been reunited and teamed with Carl, forming the strongest statistical team in the tournament. There's not much to say here. Dream is a consistent top 5 player, Sapnap is a top 10 player, and George is a top 15 player on an average day, which on its own is more than enough to get this team to 1st, since there are virtually no weak links up to this point. Then, because Carl is average, he doesn't drag the team down at all, and is able to instead just let the other scores shine, which is what, in the end, pushed the Frankensteins to 1st. Alright, that's the objective analysis of the teams done. Now, however, let's move on to a breakdown of each game team-wise. So there are 11 games to discuss here, starting with Bingo. The best team for Bingo is, surprisingly, the Green Goblins, who were helped a lot by averages. In a close second, we have the Orange Oozes, who would have probably been first if not for said averages. Next up, we have Hole in the Wall. Pete again really carries the Green Goblins in this game again, and the Goblins are followed by the Mustard Mummies, though there's an extremely large point gap between the two. The Mummies get so high in this case because of Quig, who single-handedly has a higher average than Dan and Joel together, and who is only beaten by H-Bomb and Pete in the tournament. Lime Liches absolutely dominate Buildmart, with a clear lead over second place, which is no surprise given that the Hermit's best game is known to be Buildmart. In said second place, the Goblins are here again, and at this point you're probably wondering, the Goblins have gotten first or second in most of these games, so how didn't they place higher? That's because in some later games they get absolutely destroyed, so time with a 40-point lead over second, which are the Cyan Centipedes, which further have a 30-point lead over third. All in all, these two teams do spectacularly well in Sands of Time and dominate the game mode in an extreme manner. It's a similar story for Ace Race and Parkour Warrior. Fuchsia and Cyan, both being teams with good all-around players of Minecraft who specialise in certain areas of the game which are perfect for the tournament, absolutely dominate again, with 300 points between first and second, and around another 100 between second and third in Ace Race, and 100 points between first and second, and 20 between second and third in Parkour Warrior. In to get to the other side in Whack a Fan, the Violet Vampires managed to muscle out the Cyan Centipedes for second, and also interestingly, managed to gain quite a significant lead over them of around 30 points, probably thanks to Tommy and Tubbo being fairly good at the game, and Kara and Puffy not being as good as it as others. The Fushizia Frankensteins, however, do win this game as well, with another large margin of around 50 points. Survival Games is, interestingly, won by the Lime Liches, and by an absolutely colossal margin for the game as well. This is probably due to MCC9 Blue Bats being on this team, and since they dominated survival games in such a monumental way back then, their averages have been ridiculously inflated, so that second place, Fushizia, are left in the dust. Battlebox and Sky Battle are the last of the Fushizia Cyan dominated games, and it's no surprise really, given how PvP oriented these teams are, and how PvP based those games are. The really interesting stuff, however, is with Rocket Spleef. The Lime Liches actually win Rocket Spleef, and are very closely followed by the Red Rabbits. The reason for Lime winning is that False and Fruit are both highly slept on aces at Rocket Spleef, and in addition to this, Ren and Green are not half bad either. The Red Rabbits are also really good given that Phil and Captain Sparkles are both very good at the game, and Tubbo and Nihachu aren't the best per se, but they can definitely hold their own enough for Phil's expertise to really show. Watch out for this team in MCC 11, because if Rocket Spleef is picked, Phil has been hinting at an ace he has up his sleeve, which he could use to absolutely destroy everyone if the game is picked. Alright, with that segment over, let's move on to the subjective analysis, shall we? Let's go in rainbow order, because, you know, rainbows, am I right, chat? Anyway, let's start off with the Red Ravens. The Red Ravens are a team which I don't really see having that many issues. All of them have played together multiple times, except for Captain Sparkles, which again shouldn't be an issue, since they've played Among Us together a lot as well. The team will also be trying their best to win, however I'm not sure how much practice they'll do as a team, so they may not live up to their full potential. Next up, the Orange Oozes. Have I said Ocelots in the past? I feel like I said Ocelots while recording, and I'm sorry if I did. Yeah, my mistake. These guys will probably do well. They seem to be a team that'll try to practice given that their time zones, though weird, aren't too far apart, and also have people like CPK and Kratzy on the team, both of whom try to see CPK taking the lead for this team, since Kratzy is a quieter player, and therefore this team isn't one to be count new to the event. His practice will be that much more important to help him stay on a level playing field with the more seasoned players, but practicing alone, though helpful, is nowhere near as effective as team practice. If this team can get in a good few practices, however, Pearl, Quig and Joel are all very good players and effectively cover a large portion of the minigames of the tournament, and therefore, with enough practices, I feel like Quig could potentially lead the Mummies to 4th or even 3rd. The Lime Liches. Now this is an interesting team. The Hermits have been proving more and more of late that they can be really great players, and False and Ren are already familiar with Fruit and his playstyle thanks to MCC9. The only real problem I can see for this team is leadership. With the MCC9 Blue Bats, H-Bomb really acted like the glue of the team, who held everyone together and motivated them. With this team, however, it may take a bit of a catalyst or a push in the start of the event for someone to really take that leadership role and coordinate the team's individual strengths, or at least to coordinate them well. I think it's possible for False or Fruit to step up and lead this team, but since they're both usually more reserved players, this may take quite a few games to actually come through. The Green Goblins are a team which will probably end up throwing for content, given that both Connor Eats Pants and James Charles are on this team, so even though Pete is a great leader and even though the team will probably have great chemistry, I don't really see this team trying that hard. Next up, the Aqua Abominations. This team, though weak, probably won't run into any chemistry roadblocks. Both Solidarity and Martin have teamed before multiple times, and the both of them have also teamed with Catherine before. I can see Krinios really leading this team, though Solidarity might take over from time to time, and this team's leadership and chemistry shouldn't be an issue, though their averages definitely are. The Cyan Centipedes are up next. Chemistry might be a bit of an issue for this team, though Techno and Tapple are longtime friends, and though Kara and Puffy are also good friends, there might be a bit of a disconnect between the two halves of the team, and this disconnect might lead to improper communication in high intensity situations between the two halves of the team. I think it's fair to assume that Tapple will lead this team since Techno tends to be quieter around people he doesn't know, and since Harvey already knows both Puffy and Kara. Let's talk Blue Black Cats next. This team has some of the best chemistry in this event, as not only have multiple members of the Cats teamed multiple times before, they're also all members of the X-Life SMP, which only enhances their knowledge of each other and therefore their ability to cooperate easily. In addition to this, H-Bomb is just a walking chemistry boost for any team he's on, and I think he assumed the role of leader in this situation as well. There's not much to say here really, the Cats will do really well, chemistry-wise. The penultimate team we have to discuss is the Violet Vampires. This team is probably going to be a, well, content team. Although they all have undeniable chemistry, although they're all good at the game, and although they all know each other well enough to not need a leader, I think the fact that Quackity is on this team alone indicates they're going to throw for content. This team will probably be one of the most entertaining teams to watch for sure, but unless they're extremely serious and try hard, I don't see them contending for even a top 5 spot. And lastly, we have the Fuchsia Frankensteins. This team has, in my opinion, the best chemistry in the entire event. The original Dream Team, along with Carl, has some of the, if not the best chemistry with each other, and communication will probably never be a problem for this team, especially since the entire Dream Team has been getting to know Carl more and more ever since he joined the Dream SMP. The only problem this team might have had was that every single member of it had a fairly similar niched skill set. All of them are extremely PvP and parkour oriented. However, this probably won't be much of a problem, since most of the MCC games, and especially those which are frequently picked, are PvP and parkour or movement oriented. So that's the subjective analysis done, cool. So now let's take a closer look at the individual duels. So here's the top player in every game individually of MCC. For Bingo, our best player is F-Whip, who is both good at Bingo himself and has been on a lot of good at Bingo teams since Bingo's points have been split amongst them. Next up, for Hole in the Wall, Pizza Hut completely destroys the competition, getting over 1,000 more average points than the second place H-Bomb, and Pete also gets first in Build Mart, Sands of Time and Ace Race, beating out second place by a whopping 100 points in Sands of Time and the second place Quig by 150 points in Ace Race. Technoblade claims the crown for To Get to the Other Side and Whack a Fan, beating the second place Dream by around 20 points. Dream does, however, get first place in Parkour Warrior, beating out the second place Pete by a huge 50 points for this game mode. Fruitberries, unsurprisingly, destroys the rest of the competition with his average of 1,400 in survival games, with his only immediate competition being H1, who has won 1,081. That MCC 9 survival games, man, it was really a points farm for them, as is evidenced by the fact that Rendog, who's not really known for his PvP prowess, beats out Quig, Technoblade and Dream, all by over 200 points. Kratzy takes the crown for Battlebox, beating out Dream and Technoblade and claiming his first individual game crown. Pete wins Rocket Spleef by a substantial amount, but is closely tailed by Quig, who's only 7 points behind him in second. I also found it surprising that Philza, one of the best Rocket Spleef players of the tournament, wasn't in the top 2, but apparently one too many mistakes was what kept him from the podium. Lastly, and perhaps the most surprisingly, Techno loses first place in Sky Battle to Sapnap, and by no trivial amount either. Sapnap beat Techno by over 50 points. That's right, the guy who sweated Skywars for years and had it as the main content on his channel for years didn't even get first. That's an L in my opinion. Techno only got second. And that leads us to the final player rankings. The top 3 players so far in MCC are, in third, Fruitberries with decently high scores in both PvP and movement based games. In second, H-Bomb with a slightly unbalanced set of scores in favour of movement. And finally, in first place, the statistical best player for MCC, the reigning champion of MCC individually, Pizza Hut with massively unbalanced scores in favor of movement, in which he destroyed literally everyone. And that's it for the individual analysis. Now, before I give you guys my personal predictions, here's one more comparison you might find interesting. I compiled the percentage of times each game has been picked in previous MCCs, and based on that chose the most likely games to be picked in MCC 11, and then ranked the teams based on their performance in those games. There are quite a few changes in the ranking based of this, and arguably more fair rankings, so let's go through them. First off, Lime and Cyan switch places, with Cyan moving up to 2nd and displacing Lime down. Then, positions 6 and 7 also switch, with the Green Goblins moving up to 6th and pushing the Violet's Vampires down to 7th. 8th and 9th do the same switcheroo, and therefore the Red Ravens move the Orange Oozes down to 9th, while claiming 8th place for themselves. The main reason there were this many switches was because two movement-based games, Rocket's Belief and To Get the Other Side, were both removed from consideration, along with Sky Battle, which is the game with the most uneven coin distribution after Ace Race. And well, now is that time you've all been waiting for. What are my predictions for MCC 11? Well, I think either the Fuchsia Frankensteins or the Blue Black Cats will win this MCC, with either Lion or Cyan in 2nd. However, team positions coming in coins is irrelevant for 1st and 2nd, it's Dodgeball that really matters. So therefore, out of the 4 teams I've mentioned, I can see the Blue Black Cats winning Dodgeball the most consistently, followed by the Lion Liches, then the Fuchsia Frankensteins, and then the Cyan Centipedes. I was fairly undecided about who was better out of Lime and Fuchsia for Dodgeball, so I decided to become a sheep and ask some of the other NCC statistics savvy people I know for their opinion, and they said that Lime would win that fight, so yeah. Blue, Lime, Fuchsia, and then Cyan is my Dodgeball ranking. Fuchsia, Blue, Cyan, and then Lime is my Coinswise ranking. Okay, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I tried to make everything much more visual and easier to understand with the editing on screen, so I hope that improved the feedback you gave me last video. If there's anything else you think I can improve, let me know down in the comments below, apart from saying to use new player averages for people who haven't played before, because coin balancing changes and disparities make that a horrible metric to use. Anyway, wait, before you click off the video, I've got to give a shout out to my one and only channel member, Gamer Cyclops. I set up channel memberships recently, so if you want to get a shout out at the end of these videos, consider hitting the join button down below. Anyway, if you liked the video, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and do all that good stuff. And I will see you in the next video. See ya!